Casey, you can turn into Santa Claus. Santa's here. I'm Angela, president of Fayette County Historical Society, and thank you for coming. We all know it's about to rain because it always rains on our meeting day this past year. Before we get started, I wanted to give a couple of announcements. One, we have reduced the price of our happy birthday to the courthouse t-shirts, and they are all in nice spring colors. So they're short sleeves, they're not long sleeves like mine, and they're $10. So if you want a happy birthday to the courthouse t-shirt, they're $10. And also the Historical Society is in the midst of writing a book. It's like a This Day in History book. So ideally, every time you turn a page, it'll be like March 1st, March 2nd, this day in history. So if you'd like to participate, if something happened in your family in Fayette County, or your person's from Fayette County, or your business is from Fayette County, and you want to submit something for consideration, turn that into us, and you would want the word count to be approximately 250 words, because we want it to be a one-page thing, and you could submit it to us via email. Tell your friends and family if they want to do that, and it's anywhere in Fayette County, and all the way up to the year 2020, let's say. Don't just leave it back in the olden days. The 1990s are really popular right now if you've been on social media. So all that. So right now, we have a little list. This is my little list of things that have been submitted so far. So even if we have duplicate days that are submitted, we'll just consider which one's the most interesting. So just send them into our email address. And so with that, I'm going to introduce Kenny. I have a bio that I'm going to read for him. And Kenny, along with Leslie, who's back there, are the two new members of the board. Y'all and us all voted them both into the board. And so I'm going to introduce Kenny. He even wrote it right here. I'd like to introduce Kenny. I'd like to introduce Kenny Blum. Sounds like plum, but with a B. Kenny has spent most of his life in Fayette County. He, his siblings, his wife, and his daughters are all graduates from Fayette County schools. He has been a teacher at Oak Grove Elementary School here in Fayette for the last 20 years, where he teaches library media. Many of his lessons focus on history, both as his love of history and to support the county's social studies curriculum. Over the last decade, he has attended several teaching fellowships, including the Teacher Institute at Thomas Jefferson's Monticello and the George Washington Teacher Residential Program. These experiences strengthened his teaching of history to his elementary students. Kenny's interest in local history was piqued when our historical society sent one of the old calendars to his school containing a picture of the Oak Grove School, after which his school was named. Side note, y'all can get one of those calendars for $1. We have them here. Few people know that Oak Grove Elementary, when opened in 1987, was named after this original school. Being inspired by podcasts from the Georgia Historical Society, the Atlanta History Center, and many others, Kenny decided to start a podcast on the local history of Fayette County. His podcast, Fayette Footprints, is intended to share the stories that sometimes get forgotten. So here to talk more about his podcast is Kenny Blum.
All right, well, that's it. She got it all. Good. I start off all of my podcasts with this. Welcome to Fayette Footprints, a podcast about the people, places, and events that make up the culture of Fayette County, Georgia. My name is Kenny Blum. I'm a longtime resident of Fayette County, a bit of a history nerd, and now an amateur podcaster. I do want to thank you all for giving me this opportunity to share my project with you. I've always had an interest in history, and as talking with others around here, we all have that interest in history, but we have a lot of other things that we've got going on together too. At the beginning of my teaching career, I was actually an English teacher in high school, and my favorite class was American literature, so I always felt like, man, American literature and American history should have been taught together, because You don't know what people are thinking unless you read what they wrote, and you don't understand the times unless you know what they're thinking, and vice versa. So I was like, why didn't we just teach that all as one? But when I became an elementary library media teacher, I still slanted a lot of my library lessons towards history and social studies. And over the last couple of decades, education has really pushed for science and technology, and social studies kind of gets squeezed out a little bit. And we still have milestone standards and things like that. So I always felt like social studies was a good way to incorporate, was a good thing to incorporate into my library lessons. And it was easy also. I could find a lot of books that helped support my library lessons and the social studies curriculum. We used to call that reading across the curriculum. That was our key word there. So I could incorporate stories like Henry's Freedom Box or Martin's Big Words or The Christmas That Changed America or Changed the World, which was FDR meeting Churchill for the first time, and still be able to discuss my literary elements and Dewey Decimal Classification, because y'all love the library, as well as also incorporating the history. My interest grew more, like I said, when I attended a summer teaching grant at the Georgia Archives. That was around 2012. We created a pretty lengthy list of picture books and short stories that were appropriate for elementary schools that would also support the social studies curriculum. It might be reading Click, Clack, Moo, Cows That Type, because the cows go on strike, and it's a great way to lead into Labor Day and labor unions. So things like that. Might be doing George Washington and the General's Daughter, talk about the General's Dog, talking about integrity and also the study of early American colonies, or could be Mr. Lincoln's Whiskers. Did a 12-year-old really convince Abraham Lincoln to grow that infamous beard? And if you look at the primary documents, it sure looks like it was. My teaching toolbox grew a little bit more when I went to Thomas Jefferson's Monticello for a teacher fellowship. My focus for that particular fellowship was Thomas Jefferson egalitarian? He wrote the words, all men are created equal, but at the time that really meant white, wealthy men, and that was it. So we can also jump off that conversation over how the Constitution has changed over the last almost 250 years. Then a couple years later, I went to the George Washington's version of a week-long fellowship at Mount Vernon, where my research focused on one particular enslaved member of the community. And as I've read some of the history and learned a little bit more and more about this man, I realized how many stories that are not being told, stories that help shape us, even if it wasn't always from the famous people. I use those lessons to teach our children about our founding fathers, trying not to put them on a pedestal because they're as fallible as all of us, and also trying not to judge them on the morals that we have today. So you have to kind of find that balance. My interest in both of these historical places jumped to listening to a lot of different podcasts, which were already mentioned, including the Georgia Historical Society, and podcasts that were done at Monticello and at Mount Vernon. And in my current job, and some of my volunteering at my church, I already have a lot of experience with media production. Our elementary school has a podcast we put out for parents. We produce a daily live video segment, live video announcements that are broadcast to all of our classrooms that I run. And I also create a lot of videos for teaching and for parent communications. So as I was listening to one of those Georgia Historical Society's podcasts, one called Off the Deaton Path, because it's a guy named Dr. Stan Deaton, by the way, it's a great podcast. I began to think about all the stories of Fayette County that are not being told. Plus, I kind of thought doing a podcast would be kind of fun. I mean, why do it, right? So about a year ago, I reached out to the Historical Society here to make sure someone else was not already working on this kind of project. And Angela quickly responded to me, giving me a great deal of support for this endeavor. And with that, I started I started volunteering here at the Historical Society with Casey last summer, and then kicked off my first podcast in August. And at the beginning of this month, I actually uploaded my 10th podcast of Fayette Footprints, which is kind of cool because statistics show most people don't get past 4. So I'm already I've already gotten past that point. Some of our topics that I've already done was the founding of Fayette County, the idea and development of Peachtree City. I did the roots of the town of Tyrone with Linda Howard. Talked to Gail about the historic Fayetteville City Cemetery, and I did a brief history of the Fayette County Courthouse, which, speaking of those sidebars that you don't always know, I then came back and did another episode with John Lynch about the almost burning of the courthouse during the Civil War. Because one of the things that I kind of realized that I've learned is when you think you've got the story, you don't. There's always more. There's always more. And I didn't even know about that story so that was kind of neat. And some of the not so traditional history, one of my podcasts was with Tony Davis of Smith & Davis, which actually I did that podcast in August, and that marked almost to the date, the 60th anniversary of Smith & Davis being open. Just happened to work out that way. I talked to Jim Royal of Partners 2 Pizza. How did it get the name Partners 2, which is an interesting one. And I also talked to a lady named Becky Davenport of Bloom Fosters. Originally, it was a foster care assistance program just here in Fayette County, and now they reach out to over 145 counties in the state of Georgia helping out with foster kids. And if you haven't caught my March episode yet, I highlight a few of those things that I've benefited from, which includes meeting some very fascinating people, including a lot of you guys here, some for the first time today. And as I said, I also realized once you do the research, you get the production done, you get it all out, there's another part of the story somewhere. So it doesn't end, but I love that part. I love hearing those stories that are kind of the offshoots. Some of my episodes for 2026 will include the history of the mills around Fayette County. I'm hoping to get with Thomas over the summer, and also a lady who had relatives who were working at Bennett's Mill. I want to do one of the high school athletes who actually made it to the professional leagues, including a couple that we've got listed back there in some of our archives, a history of the cinemas, and the founding of Brooks, so the ones that I've got on tap coming up. You can listen to Fayette Footprints directly off our website, fayettefootprints.buzzsprout.com. And if you don't want to try to memorize that, my brother's in the printing industry, so I got a little business card. But I've got those with the address to get there, because you can always listen to a podcast off of the website. Or if you have an iPhone, you can get it in Apple Music. Just search Fayette Footprints. It's also on YouTube and Spotify and a lot of others, so that's kind of cool. While my podcast is not strictly an oral history project, I do hope that this is a platform where stories of our beloved county can be shared for generations to come. And then I've got a brief, 2 minutes of just a couple clips that I wanted to play real fast. You know, thought I had it. Of course, had it booted up here, but now it's not. There we go. And this one. 5 different short clips.
Story, because Joel, he didn't come up with the idea for Peachtree City. He sort of got in, he got in when he was 23 years old, believe it or not. He was a kid at Georgia Tech. But the original idea...
Anyway, my dad started working there when he was 12, and he worked for Mr. Judson until he was maybe 15 or something, 16, and Judson moved to Moreland, Georgia. And he started Judson Smith Trading Post in Moreland.
500 wagons, supposedly, big long wagon train of Confederate, wagons and mules and sabered the mules, and that had to be a big deal in 1864, and it happened at night. And so, why didn't anybody write down about that? Maybe it was just they were just too embarrassing, or either just too gruesome, or whatever.
There was a post office. There was the best that we know, the one that we have now. Is the 5th post office. So the first one was in just a small building. Interestingly enough, a tree fell a couple of months ago, and they were cleaning it up. They actually got to a huge concrete block.
Is this across from the depot, kind of?
Yes,
that big tree?
yes.
Okay.
And because that's where the barber shop was, and the store or post office. We have it here now, out in our yard.
Able to navigate her grief and turn it into something productive. She used those simplistic things that she saw every day that we oftentimes in 2026 take for granted. And she said, okay, I can pour into my craft and make something beautiful despite that emotional pain that I felt.
Just so people know, when we're talking about the Old Faithful Historical Cemetery, which one are we talking about? Where is it?
We are talking about the one that is now beside what is the City Hall in Fayetteville. Of course, that used to be the old high school years ago that burned, and it was Tiger Field back there. But it's now right down there where City Center Park is, if you know where the playground and Lime Creek Brewery is. The church, we are right there as you turn in.
That is it. So, yeah, well, thank you. I've been enjoying it. I love meeting new people, and I'm hoping that, there's so many stories that I don't know that when you hear about it, man, I didn't know that. Why did I not know that? I've been here for 40-something years. So I'm hoping that that's what some of the stories can do, is kind of catch up with something that you didn't realize you didn't know. And that's my presentation.
Tell us how you prepare for an interview and how you find people besides just sitting here and you tell.
Yeah, actually, a lot of the subjects did come from being here on Tuesday night. I started flipping through things back here, and I found out about Nellie Mae Rowe, who was an artist in the area. And then able to actually connect with the lady who had written several articles in the 200th anniversary of the city. And she had also done some others. Leah Banks, she was a reporter here, so I got with her to do that one because Nellie May died a couple of years ago. So a lot of my ideas came from that. Others are just some that I've thought about driving around the town. Then you mentioned something about you were doing research on the cinemas. I'm like, oh, that would be a cool one. Then the one about doing some like professional athletes who've gone professional, I thought would be an interesting topic. And I work sometimes with Chris Dunn. He used to be the sports reporter for the Fake Citizen. So I thought he would be a good connection. That's where some of the ideas come from. And then even on the Facebook page, I had a gentleman give me a couple of ideas also, which I was like, those are fantastic ideas. Some I'm already in the process of doing. I would love to do one on some of the old schools that were here back in like the turn of the 1900s. I haven't started, I want to get all the schools kind of together before I start reaching out to find, because I know that Lamar's got people who worked in some of those schools and some others, so that's where some of the ideas come from. So then I try to find some information about the person I might be talking about and try to pull the questions from that tied into whatever they've been working on. So I did some research on, like with Bloom Fosters. I reached out to somebody because we had volunteered one day, who then connected me to Ms. Davenport, who's the CEO, and I did some research to find out about her and where it started. It was originally a very government name, the Fayette County Foster Program Services Support Center, something like that. And why they chose the name Bloom and why they changed it and expanded it across the county. So that's where, just do some research, find out what I think people might ask, what I'm asking early.
Have you ever had anyone say, yeah,
Not yet, although my first time I talked to John about the burning of, almost burning of the courthouse, he didn't want to be he didn't want to be on. He's like, I don't really want to. I want to talk on the intercom. I said, that's fine. We'll just call. Well, I called one of those days where everything was going wrong. I couldn't get good cell reception, so I'm standing in my backyard. I was trying to record the conversation just so I could have my notes, and I told him that, but my phone wouldn't record the conversation. So then I'm trying to record my wife's phone, and I'm trying to take notes. When I was done, I had like 22 pages of scratch. After about a week, I called back. I said, we have to do this over, and I got to record you. And I offered to him, if you don't like it, I won't use it. I am not trying to make somebody uncomfortable, because I've got somebody else I wanted to talk about with the Dennis Mill. And she's like, well, I don't know that I want to be interviewed. I'm like, let me try. If you don't like it, I won't do it. I'm not going to put it on there. And I tell people when I interview, if there's something that I ask you that you don't want to answer, I am not a journalist. I'm not trying to hook anybody. But, you know, if there's something you said that just didn't quite come out the right way, we'll edit it. It's okay. So, like I said, I'm not looking for the gotcha or anything like that. I'm just trying to spread some stories from the county. Yep. Yes, ma'am.
Who was that talking about the post offices?
That was Linda Howard in the town of Tyrone, which our post office still is not working yet, but that's a whole other story. So, but yeah, that she was, I bumped into her because I went to the museum thinking I was just going to walk into Tyrone Museum. No, if you ever get a chance to go to the museum in Tyrone, once you walk in, Linda then starts talking to you, and it becomes an hour and a half, 2 hour walk through time. She was fascinating. I loved it, and I was so excited to get back to her to talk, because she, you know, like some of y'all just tell stuff that happened like you just left work, and I don't even have that capacity to do that. So it's really kind of fun to talk to people who've got that kind of history built in. Yes, sir.
Do they ever plan to rebuild the post office in Tyrone?
It is actually almost done.
Okay.
They have now started letting people at post office boxes come in, but there's nobody manning the table yet. You can't go do anything else, which I think is really weird. It burned on a weekend, or burned one day, and we were at the Peachtree City Post Office by 2 days later. Why is it taking weeks to get back? Because the building's done. They finally finished it. And we've been out in the line just as much as anybody else. I mean, the mayor doesn't even know what's going on. They don't really care to tell us what's up. So, yes, ma'am.
I'm just glad you got to talk to John about the, our Confederate invasion.
Yes.
The Union invasion
Yes,
of,
ma'am.
and their whole, just to burn down the courthouse, but M.M. Tidwell, with his oratory skills.
Yes.
You know, sidelined them, and we kept the courthouse. And we do have a little bit of information on that on display in the front foyer exhibit room at the museum.
Yes,
there.
yeah.
And, but because it highlights more between the states, we've been told kind of sometimes to keep things on the DL. And so I'm glad that he got it out there because it's really interesting. People have no idea that on that day, so
Yes.
many people were put into peril.
Right.
And if it hadn't been for McBride writing everything down,
Yeah, I know.
it could have disappeared. Even though the slaughter of the mules did make the Harper's Weekly.
Yes, yep. Yeah, you said there was
So-
some mention about that. I have one where I've stumbled across, which was, because not all history is pretty, some of the lynchings that occurred in the early 1900s, and there's a big project that's, I think it's over in Alabama actually, that honors people around the Southeast. Well, I would love to do a podcast on that, but I want to word it correctly to where it's not a murder podcast. You know, how do you treat that with the respect it deserves for those people who died needlessly? But I'm also I'm hoping to get in touch with, actually, Leah, one of the lady that I talked about, Nellie Mayrow, put me on to the woman who's directing that, so I'm hoping to get in touch with her, but I'm gonna have to wait till summer, because I'm a teacher, I can't get out during the day. But summertime, I can interview all day long.
Yeah, isn't it her? This is the woman who was.
Are you really?
I was just gonna say, 'cause
Well,
she
you just
came
made
in-
that easy for a good
She
connection.
came in one day when I was here and I said, I think if this is I saw her face, I thought, I think this is the woman.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
awesome.
hello, there you are.
Wow, this made for a great thing.
I was just thinking that's it.
I need
but
your
it's not
help,
her.
please. Yes, ma'am.
There's two of this. I also wanted to say, being educated in California, and I apologize for that, is that the focus of the Civil War is so completely different.
Sure, yeah.
And coming here and seeing a world of heart and soul and, pain and suffering was not the focus in California in the education of the Civil War. So having that perspective might also be an interesting podcast or not. Maybe people don't care, but for me, it was fascinating to oh, there were actual people that were on the side of the Civil War,
Right.
because in California, that's not the way
Right.
we were educated.
Do you
Debbie
know that
knows.
Sonoma County was the only county in California that did not vote for Lincoln?
Oh, I didn't know that.
Well, I lived in Sonoma County and was a studying historian.
Yeah, so there's, I mean,
It is an
it's
awesome
fascinating.
story, and
Yeah.
they took the bell, they buried in the hill, I could go on, never mind.
But that might be an interesting perspective if anybody, cares about that. It's fascinating.
Who was from Pennsylvania, but she was an Army, Air Force brat, and so she went everywhere with her family. But when she came, she was living here in Georgia when she went to college, and she says, "The Civil War's ancient history." And my mother heard her say that,
Yeah.
and my mother said, "No," because in the 40s, she had just graduated from high school. She said, you could ship freight from Georgia to New York for an exorbitant amount of money. But that same crate shipped back from New York to Georgia cost almost nothing. And that sort of brought it home to my friend. Oh, this is more than just ancient history.
Interstate tariffs. Good Lord, about tariffs.
Good Lord.
And I don't know how accurate my mother was with that,
That's accurate.
but she was, she was like, no, you're now living where the war was fought.
Yeah, that it was fought here, that makes a lot of difference.
Makes a lot of difference,
One of the things, several years ago that the board had talked about, the historical society board, was how do we not lose the stories of our older generations like Lamar and John and stuff, and we knew it was not a podcast, but like someone needs to sit down and talk to them. So, I'm glad that your podcast is going around to those people, and it doesn't have to be stories like necessarily about Civil War, but
Right.
the 50s and 60s, what was going on in here, around here would be interesting. And then later the 80s and 90s,
Right.
like I said, because that's what's
It's starting to become history, isn't it?
that's what's interesting to people right now is all those. My roller derby team just did a little post. What were you like in the 90s which is what's on trend right now, we just did a post of that, and the Noonan County, Historical Society just did a what was Noonan County like in the nineties post, going on, so that's what people are interested in too.
I could easily segue into doing oral history projects, because I would love to do that. I just don't know, there's a lot more formality to that, and probably time.
Yeah.
But I would love to get into that also, not necessarily dealing for a podcast, but having those audio files available.
Yeah.
Would be kind of cool.
Are there currently any audio files from any other interviews or anything?
We
on
have
the
a whole
She's got a
bunch
couple
of,
audio cassettes.
we have, I wanna say it's probably like 40 to 50, tape cassettes back there from the high school Fayette Footprints, when they, but they're kind of corrupt, what would you say, that sort of?
They're old.
They're old,
Very,
like,
yeah.
so you first have to still have a cassette player at your house. And,
Believe it or not.
and the cassette players, they're kind of dusty and mildewy, so I don't know how they would play.
Yeah. Well, if that's something of value, that should be transferred to at least a CD.
We
Yeah.
did one.
Yeah.
But my computer at home does not have a CD player, does yours?
No.
Okay, so,
Yeah.
Actually, I do have an old one. now.
Okay.
I'll be
We- I
happy to
got- I have-
donate.
it's like,
My
husband does.
Transferred to some drive
That's right.
and
My
kept in
computer
your
doesn't have
computer.
Cloud
Yeah.
storage. Yeah.
You just
They
gotta
could be
wait the
playing on your
DVD
smart
is already
TV
separated.
from thumb drive.
I'm just saying, like, you have to see what.
Who's the one that I
where
did for you that
It was
Oh.
Bobby Curlin.
yeah, that one came out amazingly well, but I had to write because the tape was so generated, and you could tell that whoever was recording was out here. You could hear the cars going by, and that was one of the first times that I used AI to help clean the filter. Now I don't know if it sounded exactly like him, but I could understand everything that was being said very well. I was like, whoa.
And it is
Yeah.
time for most cassettes to
Yep.
disintegrate.
Yeah.
Right, it's about that,
exactly.
20, 30 years is
The-
pushing it, right?
Yeah.
So, but then where do you store it? If we start storing those even on a Google Drive, you're gonna fill that up, and now
Yeah.
we're purchasing, in that now.
Yes. So,
Is the best thing just to write them, go ahead and copy and then write it
Transcribe.
down?
Oh,
and
maybe transcribing?
You'll print it,
Maybe
yeah.
so.
yeah.
I'm so sorry.
Were you here?
For which one was that? Sorry.
Fayette Lynchy.
Oh, I was not. No.
Okay,
I
that's
loved it.
Donna Hep Pond right
Yeah,
there.
right.
And, that might,
That was this past Thursday.
Where was
Just recently.
On the square, they put the
It was
plaque
the
for
sign.
the.
It was the
Lincoln
Fayette
County.
Ah,
Community,
okay.
Fayette County Community, remember it's called.
that's what it was. FCC, cause,
FCC.
yeah, Renee helped set up in the
Gotcha.
So,
Thank you.
I know a couple of those people, because they're on my,
Okay.
just like Jan, they're on my,
Yeah.
Well,
Juneteenth.
oh, you can stay up here if you want.
I don't care. I can just sit right
Okay.
there.
Here's, Kenny, first of all, Kenny volunteers here the first Tuesday
Mhm.
of every month, from 5:30 to 8. I was dancing to the music. 5:30 to 8, so if you wanna drop by and give him some ideas, or
Absolutely.
say, interview me.
Mhm.
And then here's his card with the podcast on it, and then also the QR code in the back. And then if you're on Facebook, he's the Fayette Footprints on Facebook, and you can link and find the podcast there also. And speaking of Tuesdays, forget that, Thursdays, we are looking for a volunteer here on Thursdays, one Thursday a month. We're also looking for a volunteer here on one Saturday a month. It's the second Saturday of the month, because we're getting down to the point where we're closed on a Saturday a month. So if you or your family member would like to volunteer on a Saturday, let us know. You don't have to know anything, because, I mean, you learn as you go is what I'm saying.
Oh, I can attest to that.
Yeah.
People come in, and that's how you start learning what's in here.
Yeah, so we train you on the fundamentals, and then when people come in, like for the past 10, 11 years I've been here, I still don't know, but I can vaguely maybe know where something is, and we'll learn together. Or the phone numbers of people are up there, and I'll be like, well, John or Lamar or Kenny, is here on whatever day, and they can come back on that day. So, but we do need someone second Saturday of the month, or first Thursday of the month. Thursday and Saturday is 10 till 1. And you can bring your friend or your wife, and I can volunteer together, but, does anyone have any other questions for Kenny? Anyone want to make an announcement about anything else going on?
No, Kenny, where are you from originally? Is this your home?
It is. I mean, I was born in Atlanta and then went to Florida for the first 8 years, but I grew up just across from Ebenezer Road on 54. So that's where I pretty much grew up. And then my wife and I lived out in Carroll County for a while, but came back here in '06.
How many children?
2.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Any grandkids?
No, not yet. I'm hoping.
That's it, folks. Oh, next month, I don't know the date, whatever the third Saturday is, Sunday in April, Judge Thompson is giving the history of the courthouses. And, he and I are still talking or debating, are we doing it here or at the courthouse? So I don't know yet, so y'all just have to wait and see.
It's the 19th.
Okay, the 19th. So April 19th, Judge Thompson giving the history of the courthouse. And that's what we got going on. So,
I saw the Stars Mills is now open or will be open.
Thomas, Stars Mills open the
Yes.
first, wait, is it the second Tuesday?
Second Tuesday every month.
Second Tuesday from 10 to 1?
One.
10 to
Yes.
1,
And
if you wanna
you're
go to
there?
Stars
Yes.
Mill and look around this side.
So I can put it in the newspaper
Yes,
next
ma'am.
month?
Unless it's raining cats and dogs, then we don't.
What if it's just raining pebbles? Can we
Oh,
come?
you come. Yeah, as long as it's not flooded, because if you get a real heavy, bad rain, you can't get in.
Yeah,
because
yeah.
It's flooded out.
But that, the traffic and the bridge and all is finished.
Oh, the construction's done? I remember driving by there and it was a mess. It
Well,
was
they're still
just-
clearing up.
The old,
New
old
Cold
bridge.
You can get in like you used to.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's that. Thanks for coming today, and I'll come back in April. Mingle about for a minute.
Thank you.
Ask Kenny some questions.